The agenda this week reevaluated society's relationship with booze, tested the province's new preparedness plan in the event of a nuclear emergency, and considered the psychology of political tribalism. The agenda's Week in Review begins looking for answers to overcrowded Ontario hospitals. Howard Ovens, what is the reason why we're caught in that short-term horizon as opposed to much longer planning?
Well, I think we're kind of addicted to shorter and shorter sound bites, news cycles, and the politicians follow suit. And there isn't a lot of reward for long-term planning and seeing a strategy through. So in some respects, we're our own worst enemy publicly, in that we get the government we deserve. And it seems like really committing yourselves to a long-term strategy is very difficult thing to really pull through.
But here, humor me for a second here. Here's the reality, which is there's going to be an election in 4.5 months. Yeah. Now, if the current Minister of Health said, you know what, I'm going to give your hospital twice as much money next year as this year, there's every possibility he won't be the Minister of Health in 4.5 months. You know, might lose the election, he might get shuffled to another portfolio. The realities of politics are such that you can't make a 5-year commitment to a hospital, can you? If you're in government.
Well, the commitment can be changed. That's the nature of any contract with government, is that the same government or a new government can change the commitment as circumstances change.
So how do you get long-term predictability?
I think it takes leadership and vision, and it takes also, to some extent, a media and a public that respond to those types of messages.
It's important to remember that this is not a debate about only the funding of different kinds of providers. There's people, patients, clients that are at the heart of this. Right now, we have more than 4,500 patients sitting in hospital. They're often frail elderly. They often have chronic long-term conditions, and they keep coming back. And sometimes it's increasingly common that they can't be discharged because there's no other place for them to go. That's 4,500 people with families, with personal lives and histories, and I think we're forgetting that they're at the very heart of this. That number has increased by 20% in just a very short period of time. So every day that goes on that we're not getting serious about a long-term plan, the number of alternate level of care patients is increasing.
So let's just understand this. In a hospital, that is the most expensive setting for those patients to be cared for. Yeah. If they could be in one of Candace's long-term care facilities, which is a cheaper model for addressing their needs.
It's also arguably
a
more appropriate level of care.
Yeah. So we'd save money and do better.
Yeah, we've done a lot of work in modeling around different models of care. I think the reality is we can't just keep these siloed sectors happening. We need transitional models of care, and it's something we've done a lot of work in Long-Term Care Plus. And it's other models of care, so that take a post-acute model. So you fracture your hip, you're in an accident, you go into the Cornwall Hospital, you get that hip repaired, and then you're out of there. You're rehabbing in an appropriate setting at less cost and freeing up that acute care bed for the people that really need it.
But does that alternative setting exist yet?
Well, it does to some degree, and this is, in the budget this year, it was announced, the potential models of care, and it's still being worked out, but voucher systems, looking at, I have 34,000 people on a wait list to get into a long-term care home. Maybe some of those could be cared for elsewhere. We've got an opportunity over the next 3 years even of using decanted long-term care homes that can't be redeveloped and using those for other care sites. I know there's rehab happening in one site. I know retirement homes are looking at turning their wings into other model of care. So it's happening, it's just we have to get it moving faster.
Harold R. Johnson, who wrote a book called Firewater about Indigenous relationships with alcohol, and he said this about how the rest of the population views alcohol. In their story, if a person does not drink, it is automatically assumed they do not drink because they have a religious reason, or more often, it is assumed it's because they can't handle it. Only alcoholics in their story do not drink. Healthy, normal people in that story often consume alcohol daily. Every significant event is marked by alcohol. Birthdays, marriages, graduations, a sports team winning or losing, and even death is saluted with a drink, a toast. To not drink is to cut oneself off from important parts of the story. Christine, you're our historian here. How did alcohol become so integral to basically every ritual we have in society?
See, one of the things that I worry about with having this conversation is making it sound like it's a new thing. Alcohol's always been integral to every part of our society. It's been, I mean, not in every culture exactly, but in our culture, in Western civilization, it's certainly been a massive part of all celebrations and all bonding. Beer grew up with agriculture, grew up with civilization. You know, and some people even theorize that it played a role in people being able to have social bonding. So it's not new. If anything, we drink less now than we have in the past. You know, when we didn't trust the water, we drank that instead. We drank beer instead of water. And so I think that sort of to make it a modern problem is ahistorical. We did have prohibition, of course, which took it away for a while,
well, sort of,
and then brought it back.
Right.
So,
Jen, let me ask you, in terms of the point that Harold is making here, that not to indulge in alcohol at all of these different rituals, in some respects, cuts us off from all of these important parts of our quote-unquote story. How long did it take for you not to feel cut off from all of this because you stopped drinking?
You know what? It took about a year and a half. And when I started to share openly and honestly about the fact that I couldn't drink anymore, then I felt much more at ease in social situations. And I think that the narrative is changing. I do think that while there might be stats that show that binge drinking is on the rise, I think that there's a counter social movement to celebrate healthy lifestyles. And I think that there is definitely a strong cohort of younger people who, you know, just like juicing and all the different sort of mindfulness and yoga, those are all things that are equally as celebrated and routine. And I think that the feelings of being alienated in social situations because you're not drinking, there's a shift going on. And I think that because people are sharing their stories more openly about addiction or even just about how alcohol wasn't working for them, whatever that means, there is more of a social acceptance to not drink.
I want to ask Anne about that. When you go out, you know, for a Friday night dinner or whatever,
right? And
everybody, you know, they take the drink order, of course, before they
right.
take anything else. And you are not ordering alcohol.
Right.
Are there people around that table who may not know of your past with alcohol and saying, come on, Anne, one drink, what the hell?
Absolutely, and that doesn't go away. But I would really agree with Jen that the recovery movement is alive and well, and it's at an interesting, it's like a revolution.
You know, we have 25 reactors, as you mentioned, on the Great Lakes, 18 in Ontario, 7 in the South. In the United States, and we have 2 or 3 people within the provincial government that oversee nuclear preparedness. We simply don't have enough capacity to update our plans. And I think the second issue is in my mind, there's a complacent mindset that's set in the provincial government related to nuclear risks. We don't think it's a problem. This is something that happens far away. The risk of an accident isn't high. And the other issue is they just don't think it's their responsibility. After Fukushima, what did the provincial government do? It simply sent a letter to the federal government saying, you know, make sure everything's okay. And it shouldn't do that. The province is responsible for off-site emergency preparedness. The federal government is the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission is responsible for on-site safety, but the province has clear jurisdiction over off-site safety, and it hasn't carried through on that.
Let me pick up on one word you said there and put it to Stephanie, complacent. The allegation is the industry is complacent as it relates to these issues. How about that?
I would actually strongly disagree with that. So after the Fukushima accident that happened in Japan, the industry takes a look at what happens as a whole. We study it, and what we've done at Ontario Power Generation is we looked at that event and then we said, is that something that similar can happen here? And really what happened at Fukushima was the unexpected happened. You know, the tsunami took out their power. So what OPG has done is we've taken a look and put safeguards into place and spent a lot of money actually having backup generators, other ways to add cooling to the reactor, and we've done a lot of that work. In fact, we've actually led the industry in North America in improving our plants to be able to respond to something similar to what happened at Fukushima.
Teresa, fair to say that Lake Ontario is not about to present us anytime soon with a tsunami, and therefore what happened at Fukushima is unlikely to happen here, and therefore we don't really have to prepare for that?
Well, the problem at Fukushima that the official reports noted is that the industry there felt that a big accident couldn't happen, and the regulators and industry there will say that's why the harm was worse there than it should have been. And unfortunately, we do run into that here in Ontario and in Canada. And our message is that big accidents can happen in all complex technology, whether it's nuclear power plants like the CANDU or the Challenger. And the answer is you need to be prepared for an emergency. Yes, we want those extra backup power installed, absolutely, but that doesn't mean you don't prepare for the most severe accidents so that you can better protect the surrounding population, because there are concrete things you can do to better protect the population if you take those accidents seriously.
Are you saying that we are inadequately prepared today in the event of a big accident?
Yes, that's my view. I've looked at the emergency plans at all of Canada's nuclear plants, and my view is we're not adequately prepared.
Dave, what's your view?
My view is that the province has taken excellent steps to improve the emergency response plan.
So we are adequately prepared today?
I believe we are adequately prepared today. I think the plan has to strike a balance between what you can plan for and the unknown unknowns, as Donald Rumsfeld would say. So I think what the plan, the major update to the plan that's there is this idea of contingency planning zone, preparedness of equipment that can be used in case the unknown happens. We don't know what that might be, but there are now at least provisions within the plan that can address through contingency planning some of those unknown that could occur.
What's really fascinating about polarization is how it differs. The issues, I mean, the sort of rational conversation you've described still happens around all sorts of issues, like you know, should we replace the sewer system? Very few people get into a tribal thing about that. But the issues that cause people to get tribal, if you want to say that, are different from place to place. Like in Europe, it's GMOs. Americans are not very exercised about GMOs. On the other hand, they are exercised about guns, whereas in almost everywhere else in the world, gun control is simply, well, what would keep, you know, what can we rationally do to reduce people shooting one another? And it's simply an administrative thing that's solved. So it's really fascinating that it's not the same issues that get people crazy. That's, I guess, a tip-off that it's not about factuality, it's about what you're signaling to other people about where you are and who you are.
Let's bring another voice into this conversation. Here's the New York Times columnist David Brooks. Back last month, writing in the New York Times, from an identity politics that emphasized our common humanity, we've gone to an identity politics that emphasizes having a common enemy. On campus these days, current events are often depicted as pure power struggles, oppressors acting to preserve their privilege over the virtuous oppressed. Quote, a funny thing happens, political psychologist Jonathan Haidt said, when you take young human beings whose minds evolved for tribal warfare and us versus them thinking, and you fill those minds full of binary dimensions. You tell them that one side in each binary is good and the other is bad. You turn on their ancient tribal circuits, preparing them for battle. Many students find it thrilling. It floods them with a sense of meaning and purpose. Okay, Will, you start us off on this. For example, the social justice left. The aim is to obliterate prejudice and in and out group thinking. Do some people fall victim to this very thinking?
So I'm confused by the way we say some people. Do you mean the social justice warriors themselves falling into the... That's actually a really great point, because once we start seeing kind of the enemies out there, people start simplifying in many different ways. So as soon as you start seeing all conservatives as being, say, alt-right Nazis, right, then you can have a conversation with anyone who just even varies just slightly differently than you. And I think we've seen this a lot recently, you know, here in Ontario and all throughout, actually most of the world actually right now, where simply the push to actually call someone the most radical terms and equate them with the most radical people simply for kind of diverging a little bit is fairly extreme. The thing, though, I do want to push back a little bit on is that I don't know the degree to which all of our undergraduates actually feel this way. I think there's also a stereotype right now that we're having regarding kind of our undergrads. And for the most part, I feel that we can have very reasonable conversations, with our students, and they tend to be much more willing to discuss things at much more complex levels. Yeah. So I think we might be stereotyping the extreme undergraduate the same way that again, there might be some extreme undergrads who do this, but I think we're all falling to a little bit of seeing radicals everywhere.
What's your experience on that, Anne?
Yeah, I think that, so it's certainly not in my experience, right? I think that undergraduates actually are very receptive to complex discussions about these things, and so it may vary a little bit, and I think that you always have some people who fall into that very extreme camp. But I think that the degree to which that's a general trend may be overstated. Having said that, I think it's worth taking seriously the fact that it's happening with some people. And at least one of the reasons that it does, I think, has to do with this polarization that we're seeing, that the people who have the loudest voices are the people who are on these two extremes. So we know from a lot of research that I don't like that word, apparently. Tribalism. Yeah, tribalism actually increases our tendency to really kind of hunker down, increases under situations of threat, right? Because we have other kinds of propensities too. One of them is for open-mindedness and exploration, and that's also important for our thriving and our survival. But it's when we're under threat that we really kind of go to the tribe. So in a situation where a lot of the loudest voices are also sounding really threatening, right? So some of the loudest voices maybe are from the alt-right, and so folks who really have concerns about social justice may end up misidentifying threat in some places where it doesn't actually exist.
And that is the Agenda's Week in Review for this Friday, February 2nd, 2018. You can see all of those conversations in their entirety at tvo.org or on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda. And thanks to our nightly Twitter live stream on our Periscope page. That's periscope.tv/theagenda.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.